I am so excited to be here with you today and to have this. I'm sure it's going to be amazing conversation because you are one of the people who I respect and admire. And today I want to talk to you about something that is personally very important to me, and I know it's important to you. It's personal leadership. What?
Well,
Yeah, take a minute or two to just introduce yourself.
okay. Well, hi, Anna, and thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate that. And I have a great deal of respect for you and the work you've been doing and the journey you've been traveling, I might add, because, we are our journey. That's who we are. And I'm my journey. And I do want to talk to you about personal leadership because I think it's very important. If I describe personal leadership is taking responsibility for the consequences that you find yourself in. And when I say the consequences, we make decisions on a daily basis. Even when we don't make a decision, we're actually making a decision. And the consequences of all of those decisions are the circumstances we find ourselves in life. And sometimes those circumstances are very challenging. There are relationship breakups. There are financial pressures. There are emotional concerns. There are feelings of inadequacy. There are all of these circumstances in our lives which, give us trauma, if you like, internal trauma. And personal leadership is about recognizing all of that, taking hold of it, and taking control of it. Now, does that mean you can control all your circumstances? No, it doesn't, because sometimes we have to accept our circumstance and we have to live with it. Okay. But that doesn't have to define us. So before I get into personal leadership and the detail about that, maybe I should tell your listeners who I am and
Please, yeah.
what gives me any authority to say any of this. I started by saying that this is about that we're defined by our journey in life, not, not just, we're not defined by our job. We're not defined by our education. We're not defined by our family, but we're defined by our journey. And if I look at my journey, you know, I was an officer in the Australian Army when the Vietnam conflict was on. I was a businessman. I've been in the direct sales industry for over 45 years, where I've been a sales director, a senior vice president, a president, a general manager, a CEO. I've worked in for very large American corporations. I've worked in 11 countries. I've trained over 300,000 salespeople in my career. I'm a life coach. I'm a business coach. I've, uh, but that's not all. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. I've survived leukemia. I had a horrific leukemia journey. And when I got leukemia, there was no cure. There was only a 35% survival rate when I was diagnosed. That was the number. So there was a 65% chance you wouldn't make it. That was pretty scary. And I can talk about that journey maybe a little later on, but all of that, and even today, after all of the drugs they gave me I've had 4 bone marrow transplants, all the drugs they gave me to stop rejection destroyed my kidney. So I'm on dialysis 3 days a week. All of these are just circumstances in my life, but they do not define me. What defines me is I'm a spiritual being who takes control and lives with those circumstances. And then I have a positive outlook as to what life's about. So that's who I am. But, you've got a journey as well. And your journey is very interesting. It's full of courage. You've done things that some people would never do. You know, you left your birth country and came to a strange world. You didn't even speak our language, for goodness sake. So tell us about your journey.
Well, David, I've always loved listening to you because I see you as a mentor, as a spiritual guide, and just an amazing, amazing person with an incredible life story. And when I listen to you, my story feels like so insignificant. But you know what I want to say? You and I, we both see eye to eye when it comes to taking personal power back. And I've seen this in my own life. And yes, I've been through a lot of migration. I've migrated 2 countries. I've started over and over again, twice, learning new languages and all of that. Resilience was not even like I didn't even know the word resilience back then as a child. I just felt it. I felt I have to bounce back. It was a survival, but at the same time, I always was holding on to something like um, I would say optimism. I'm very optimistic, and my mother is a survivor, huge survivor. And I think you and I we have this hope. We never lose hope. And so yeah, lately in the last 5 years, I've had some really big transformations in my life, to say the least. And you know that. And that's why I am speaking about this topic of taking personal leadership back, because we sometimes we don't even know what it is. Sometimes we have it and we lose it. We lose the confidence. We lose self-trust. And and I know you've been holding on to yourself no matter what. And in my case, I lost it, I got it back. And today I want to share a little bit about how to get it back, how to keep it and never lose that faith in yourself. And so, yeah, thank you. But I am a life coach as well. And now I started doing wellness retreats in India, which is my greatest passion, where I actually take people on a journey with me for that particular reason, to get back that willpower, your confidence, and self-trust. But anyway, please tell me, how do you keep that strong self-belief and leadership in your life?
Well, it wasn't always that way, I might just tell you. You know, we we get there through a series. I explain it this way. Experience is failing and getting up again and doing it again until you get it right. That's experience. People who have success, success, success in their lives, they don't have any experience. They just have luck. It's experience comes from failing and doing it again until you get it right. So knowing what not to do and what to do in your life and in your living. And so sometimes people beat themselves up. I'm going to give you a really simple example. In my leukemia journey, I call it a leukemia journey because let me explain. I had 8 types of chemotherapy, 4 types of radiation therapy, 4 bone marrow transplants, 42 blood transfusions, 15 platelet transfusions, and they told me I had 90 days left. I was in the ICU twice on a respirator. I remember waking up one day and saying, gee, I'm still alive. I was surprised because I was that sick. But it's really interesting. I never thought I was going to die, actually. I created, even though the circumstances were horrific and it was frightening, and I got diagnosed when my children were 1.5 and 3. So I didn't know that I could look after them. I started making recordings to give them life advice because I didn't think I was going to be there to give them that life advice. And then I read a book called Love, Life and Miracles by Bernie Siegel, and it talked about being a difficult patient and having a goal beyond the difficulty. And I set a goal to see my daughters walk down the aisle. I wanted to survive until my daughters walked down the aisle. That became my goal. And then I created a philosophy. because I had a terminal disease, and my doctors had told me we don't have a curative treatment for your disease. So they told me I was going to die. So, that's a, you can get depressed. And I got depressed. I went into a hole. I cried myself to sleep. And do you know what? That was all right. It was okay to let that out. I didn't have to be tough and hold it in. I actually had to let it out. I let it out. And then I said, no, I, I want to get beyond this. And that's where my journey to spiritual enlightenment came as well, because I realized I had to do inner work to release the outer hold on me, if I can say that. So I set this goal to see my daughters walk down the aisle. And then I kept a diary. And every day in that diary, I wrote down what my blood counts were, whether I had any infections or not, whether I'd exercised that day. And I had on this diary a checklist I did every morning. I had attitude. And I used to give myself a score from 1 to 10 for attitude. And over 2,000 days of keeping that diary, 2,000 days, I kept this diary. Every morning I had to choose my attitude. And I chose, except on a very few days, 10. I started the day by choosing the attitude. I was going to have a positive attitude towards the day. I was going to be grateful that I got that day. I was going to be grateful I lived through that day. And some days were tough. Some days were very tough. But here's the thing. No matter how dire your circumstances, you can say, I'm either going to be a victim or I'm not. And I decided I wasn't going to be a victim of my circumstances. So I created a credo for myself, and it was called Prepare to Die, Plan to Live. So I got my personal circumstances organized in case I died, and I didn't want to leave my wife and children destitute. So I sort of worked everything around that. But I planned for a future. And that's how I traveled through my cancer journey. So if there's one thing you can do in your dire circumstances, whatever they are, is you can plan to die and prepare to die and plan to live. Prepare for the worst and plan for the best. That's a starting point.
Wow. Yes. Yes. Wow. I'm listening and I can't even imagine. I cannot imagine what you've been through. And yes, you've been choosing your attitude every single day and you've been planning for the future, assuming that there will be maybe, you know, the ending or will be all good and you will live on. And I think it takes so much courage. David, I can't tell you how courageous you are because in my darkest hour, when I all I could feel is anxiety, panic, and terror, what worked for me is self-talk. And we have voices in our heads, right? The bad wolf and the good wolf. And the bad wolf takes advantage of you when you at your rock bottom and it goes and attack you with your worst fear, with your worst thoughts of horror. Okay. And at that point, something, even if it's 1% in that soul, in the spirit here that can rise up and give you something to hold on to. And you said it was a choice of attitude
Yes.
and seeing the future, realizing that this is my reality, but also looking at the future. And for me, it was self-talk. And I really want to say to anybody who is listening that if that voice, if you can find that voice who can say to you, you'll get through this. You will get through this. Listen to me, you will get through this. Do you understand? This is a temporary, this is not your life. And yeah, I remember I was at the rock bottom and I was listening to the horror stories in my head, and then I would just get out of bed, and that voice would say to me, you know what? Just get through the day. Just get through today, and that's good enough. So yeah,
I've
but David, something about people, like I think you and I, again, I don't want to say we're special in any way, but something about us is, I don't know, call it courage, determination. What do you think it is?
Well, I think you have courage. I've seen you display that courage. You do things that I would never do, I might add. So, courage is different for every person. It's because what we're doing is we're overcoming our internal demons, as you said it, the bad wolf. That's courage. Courage is getting past the bad wolf. That's courage. And for some people, courage is surviving the next day. I I I got a message yesterday from a relative who I haven't spoken to 6 years. Went quiet, and she put a post on social media. She said, "I've just come out of a narcissistic, coercive, abusive relationship of 6 years and found myself free. And now I know why she didn't talk to me, because she wasn't allowed to, you know? Wow. So the courage to break free from that relationship, that takes huge courage, because you become a victim of your circumstance. You don't think how you don't know how you can get out of it. But she's broken free. But it took a lot of courage. And I look at that and I think there are so many people out there who are displaying courage on a daily basis. And what is courage? It's the next barrier and the next. We achieve this stuff a little piece at a time. You talked about self-talk. I started learning about affirmations in the 70s, and because I wanted the secret of success. I wanted the secret of business success. I was all gung ho for business. And I read this book by Napoleon Hill called Think and Grow Rich. And in there, he talks about affirmations and self talk. And I took that for the business part. But I learned later that self talk is so much more powerful than just getting a good attitude towards business. And in that same book, he talked about adversity. And he said, and I quote, "Inside every adversity, there lies the seed of a equivalent or equal benefit. All you've got to do is look for it." So no matter what every time I've had an adversity, that saying has gone into my mind. And I've gone, okay, this adversity, inside this, there's a benefit. What lesson do I need to learn? What has the universe sent me this message for? What decision did I make that caused these consequences? Back to personal leadership. I've now got to the stage where I believe that we have to take personal responsibility for all of the circumstances in our life. Even though we may see ourselves as being victims of outside circumstances and other people, we are responsible for how we respond to it all. And that's where the self-talk can come in. You can design how you're going to talk to yourself about how you're going to respond. I know that's a long answer, winded answer, and I apologize because I just go off, but
No, no, you're absolutely right. You are so right. It's about how you see yourself. If you see yourself as being a driving force in your life, and I'd say, grabbing life like a bull by the horns and saying, I am charging this. This is mine. I own my life. I've got it. I got it. Versus saying there are events happening outside of me and they impact me all the time and I don't know what to do. I feel sorry for myself and poor me. And yeah, I think it's maybe it's the childhood, the way we've been raised, maybe. Or maybe it's a learned skill, which I think it can be learned. Everybody can learn this. That's why, coaching is there. But I think what you're saying is the essence of the self-leadership. It's that kind of um, self-management, self-discipline, courage. What else do you think it is?
Well, you're the one with the psychology degree and and a lot of university learning around these subjects. And I'm sure there's been a huge amount of research done. But I would think, knowing you, you've probably learnt more from your spiritual retreats than you have from your years in university. But when you marry those together, you have the answer to that, which is, well, you tell me what you think the answer is to that, your answer.
Well, David, actually, I think now that you're raising this question, I think this is maybe the core of this discussion is I haven't been spiritual before. I've been trained as a psych with all the evidence-based research, and unless you can feel it, touch it, smell it, it doesn't exist. And later on, when I did hit the rock bottom, when I had no control over my life and events. I've lost all the control. You feel so hopeless, helpless, absolutely devastated. So at that point, psychology, yeah, it helps, but to a certain degree. But I never realized that what really was my cure and my rescue is when I started tapping into spirituality. And this is when you and I connected. You and I found a lot of common ground because of the way we see the world through the spiritual lens.
Yes, yes. And I think that that is the key, that we are all spiritual beings. When you can perceive into the center of a person, you can see what their true intent is. And as you become more sensitized, you can feel it and see it, almost to the point where we do not need language. We can feel it. You can walk into a room and feel whether it's a hostile room or a welcoming room. You don't need any language for that. You can walk into a room and say, everybody's judging me or nobody's judging me. You can walk into a room and the room can change energy because of the energy you bring into the room. So all of these are indications of what powerful individuals we all are. When I talk to anyone, when I'm coaching people, when I look at them, I see them for what they can become, not what they are. I never see them for what they are. And when I ask them who they are, their image of themselves is always far less than what I see. It amazes me. I've trained over 300,000 people, mainly in the direct selling. So these are individual entrepreneurs, some of them incredibly successful, like making $1 million a month. I mean, incredible. And some of them struggling to make $200 a month. But they all have this desire inside them. And what I realized is the difference between the really successful one and the also ran, the one who's not successful, is nothing. It's minute. It's minuscule. It's not a huge difference. And it's usually a little tweak in attitude. And I've seen people, I had one lady who I coached for a year, and she was earning about $1,200. I'm going to use money, but it's not the only answer, but it's an answer. She was earning about $1,200 a month, struggling in this direct selling business she was in for years. And I coached her for 12 months, and I just got her to reorientate herself. She was Chinese. She was a school teacher in China. English was her second language. And unlike you, who can think in English, she could only think in Chinese and translate into English, which is a very, as you would understand, with English as your second language, that's a very difficult thing to do. And it really stopped her from blossoming her business. And I said to her, why are you chasing all of these English speaking people when there's a huge Chinese speaking population in this country who you can communicate with powerfully? Because in her soul, she was a powerful woman. She was so full of courage, so full of life, and so full of ambition. At any rate, she made the change and she built her business to where she makes $20,000 a week.
Wow.
That was the difference in the change. She wasn't a different person. She just shifted her focus ever so slightly. But the results were mind-boggling. That's what I see. When I talk to people, I see them and I see that they're looking at themselves and going, oh, I'm no good, I can't do it, it's not achievable. And what I realize is they're in the wrong market. So, if you're hanging around the wrong people, you're getting feedback that makes you feel like you're inadequate and you're not good enough and, you're not capable. Well, change the people. Move to people who love you and see your potential and see your beauty and see your inner strength and see your heart, and then watch yourself blossom. That's that's the answer I see.
Yes. And sometimes we don't have this clarity, sometimes we're stuck and we just can't move on because there's like block,
Oh,
can't
you
see
need
the
a coach.
solution.
That's why you need a coach. That's why you have somebody like you or me come up and guide you through the process. Because
That's right.
sometimes you can't see that you're in the wrong forest. You should be in a different, you should be in different soil, being nourished, not being depleted. And
Exactly.
we
Exactly.
can
And
choose our environment.
I'm not saying this because I am a coach, but I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart as a human to human. Anybody who is going after something in life, something that they love and passionate about, need a coach or a mentor or a good friend, somebody who would listen to them and reflect, help them to reflect, because we just get stuck all the time. No matter how gifted, talented, skilled you are, people get stuck in all sorts of situations, and it seems so like bad because they don't see the solution. If I knew what I know now back then, in my 20s, I would absolutely 100% find somebody who is a mentor or like a mentor who would guide me through my journey because my parents didn't know. They didn't know. So I think, it doesn't have to be paid service if people don't want to, but somebody who can guide you through the thickness into the clarity. And I think this is what you mean as well. Yeah, what do you think?
I do, but I don't agree that what I what I'm going to say is this: people who don't pay for advice don't, that's how much the advice is worth, quite often. So sometimes what we have to do is we need to pay for the advice so that we value it and follow it. Because I've given lots of free advice in my life and seen people do nothing with it. I've gone to other people where I'll charge them $15,000 and they'll take the advice and run with it and their lives change. And I think to myself, what was the difference between the advice I gave for free and the advice I gave for $15,000? Not a lot. The difference was the person who valued the advice versus the person who didn't value the advice. So I I rather insist that people pay. Now, it might be according to what they can afford, but I think you you have to invest in yourself and the change. And you may be in dire circumstances, so invest a little to start. Invest in a book that changes your mind and your thinking. Invest in a podcast that lifts your spirit. And then as you improve, invest in a coach that guides you through. And don't invest in a coach for a month. If you're going to have a coach, if you're going to have a mentor, you need somebody who's going to be there for a year or two to guide you through the process because it's an evolution. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a, a magic fix. And people get that wrong. I do, of course, that people go, which is self-paced. Now, this is the amazing thing. The people who do the course lesson after lesson after lesson in 14 days never get anything out of it. The people who take 14 weeks to do the course, which is what it's designed for, where they do a week and then they do the workbook and all of the activities and they do the thinking and the inner work, then they come back and they do the next week and then that compounds, they're the ones whose lives change. Why? Because they're giving it a chance they're actually getting to do internal work. And that's why you need a coach who's with you for the distance, a distance, so they can help you with the internal work. They need to, you know, you become the accountability person. So they need you. They need you to go, hey, slap on the wrist. You're now conning yourself.
That's
That's
exactly
my
right.
thinking. That's my thinking.
And you're right. I agree with you 100%. There are no quick fixes.
No.
And, sometimes people just want a quick advice. Tell me what to do, tell me what to do. But coaching is not about telling what to do, right? It's about guiding people to find their own solutions. And in that, the transformation happens, but it's a process. And because you need to build the trust and open up to the process, it takes time. So 100% on the same page with you about this. David, so for people who are listening, so we're talking about personal leadership, taking that personal power back. Where would you start if somebody wants to get on this journey?
I have something called the fifth point of the compass. If I was to, now not you, but if I was to drop the average Aussie into the middle of Moscow, okay, and I gave them a map of Moscow, which was written in Russian, they'd have no idea how to get out of Moscow. What they need, even if I gave them a compass and the map had a north facing on it, that wouldn't help them if they didn't know where they were in Moscow to start. That's the fifth point of the compass. You've got to know where you're starting from. And so I think getting out a piece of paper and journaling where you are in your life right now, just writing down for nobody else to read, just for you to keep for yourself, and write down, this is my life, this is where I stand at the moment. That becomes the beginning point. And from that beginning point, you can set goals to change. You can make decisions about what you like and don't like about where your life is. Most people don't know where they stand. They don't know where they stand financially, emotionally, spiritually, even physically. They don't know where they stand. You go to the doctor tells you where he thinks you stand, but he doesn't really know. He doesn't know how you feed yourself, what nutrition you put in your body. He doesn't know, you say, oh, yes, I drink 8 glasses of water a day and you only drink 3 because you lied. No, he doesn't know any of that. But you don't lie to yourself. That's the beginning position, not lying to yourself and stating where you begin, because only from there can you pick a point to travel to. That's my solution, the starting point.
This is so interesting because what I'm listening to you and what I think you are saying in a nutshell is the truth, facing the truth.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I
that's the
put
starting
it, I,
point.
I put it in a way that people can. I discovered in all my years of doing this stuff, I can tell people what they need to do, or I can draw it out of them. It always works better if you draw it out, because if you tell them, they reject it. They go, "That's not me," you know. That's not me. Even if it is them. And usually, the more they protest, the more it is them. So you
Yeah.
can't tell people. You've actually got to guide them towards the discovery for themselves.
Yeah.
Because when they discover for themselves, that's when they can truly make a goal to change. They can make a decision to be different. I have a younger brother who's also a psychologist who has said to me, sometimes the only time you can get a person to change is when they're in a crisis, because that's the only time they'll really look honestly at their circumstance. And I think you can tell me, is that right?
Yes. Yes, it is 100% true. And I can speak from my own experience. It took a crisis for me to face my truth. Because when things go okay, okay-ish, you've got this little stone hit your head. You don't listen. Then the brick comes and then the wall collapses. And until the wall goes down on you, that's when it gets so painful that you have no choice but look in the truth in the eyes and say, yeah, this is what I am. This is how my life is. And I think this is the biggest wake up call. And I really want to say this, it doesn't have to be a crisis. If people just look at themselves with honesty, to themselves, not somebody else, just be honest with themselves. And like you said, reflect on themselves and write things down. Where am I in my life, financially, relationships, emotionally? Then maybe that's a starting point.
I think that that's a great starting point. And then from there, you can make little steps, little goals, little little steps out of the quagmire, if you like. You don't try and change everything at once. And really what we do is we overwrite habits. People have habits of thinking, habits of behavior, habits of eating. Very rarely can you stop a habit. What you can do is rewrite a habit. You can overwrite it. So you're programmed to think a certain way. If you want to think a different way, you've got to overwrite the program. And that comes back to what you were talking about before, Anna, and that is self-talk or affirmations. I think the self-talk, the the writing of affirmations is an ability to reprogram the self-talk. And that can make a big change. What do you think?
100%, because nobody taught me or nobody taught us how to navigate the mind. The monkey, that's a monkey, a restless monkey, anxious monkey that's jumping all around, and it's a distraction from what's important. And no one ever taught me until I got the wall came down on me. I had a personal crisis. I faced my truth. It was a big wake up call for me. And this is when I went into the spiritual path of things. And this is where I've learned the mind discipline, right? The self-talk. Um, and this is where I really started paying attention to what goes on in my head and how to manage it and how to focus my mind. Um, and I think that was one of the biggest lessons for me. Since then, I became very dedicated meditator. Um, does it answer the question?
Well, you brought up a very important thing, meditation. Meditation is uh, an absolute key to to self-discovery, in my opinion. And I first learnt about meditation from an interesting teacher who, in 1969, good grief, this just tells you how old I am. I did a course called Mind Dynamics, run by a guy called Dr. Alexander Everett. He was a Jesuit priest who left the priesthood after studying the Eastern religions in Tibet and ran a girls' school in England for a while. And then he started this mind dynamics program, teaching people meditation uh, and the power of the mind and the power of going down into the alpha metal level and theta levels of meditation and changing things around you. And he was teaching us telepathy and all sorts of very interesting things. Now, at the time, I was 19 in 1969, so this was wow, like crazy stuff. Never been exposed to any of this, but I grabbed hold of it and I became really good at meditating. And I had a friend in Sydney who was doing the course with me, and she said, "Let's practice telepathy. Let's see how clever the telepathy can, whether that can work." I said, "Okay." She said, "I'm going to send you a message, and when I do, I'm just going to let you know that I'll be sending you a message." I said, "Okay." So about 2 weeks later, after this event, after we had the conversation, I'm driving across Sydney Harbour Bridge from the eastern suburbs to the northern beaches, and I get a feeling, an undeniable feeling that I have to contact this girl. Now, no mobile phones in those days, and I didn't know her phone number, so I turned around and drove to her apartment in the eastern suburbs. And I knocked on the door, and she said, "Perfect, you got the message." Just so that at 19, there was confirmation to me that we can communicate if we think about people. And then I realized talking to people over the years, people often say to me, "I'll bring somebody to mind and they'll turn up in my life." It's the same stuff, but you can learn this by meditation. Meditation is a gateway to all sorts of knowledge, starting by stilling the mind and understanding self and just going to know who you are. So that's about breath and and self-awareness. And when I was going through my cancer journey, when things were really hopeless, I did a lot of meditating to try and heal my body and heal myself. And it works, is all I can say. I'll tell you another story on another day, not today, of my miracle cure, but that's down the path we're just discussing. So I think what you brought up about meditation is very important. What other skills can you advise that people should do as well?
Um, as a personal leadership, I think for me, what worked for me is, again, I'm not gonna say what people maybe want to hear, but I'm gonna say the truth, is solitude, as being alone. And it's not always possible for people who have families, partners and so on. But since I got divorced, I spent a lot of time by myself. And in that solitude, I had the time, I had the space to go completely within myself. And this is where everything started. On a very deep level, I started looking and contemplating and unpacking, the depth of my soul. So yeah, that would be my advice. If there's any time and space in someone's life to be alone, it's one of the best things you can do.
Or even to walk into a park and sit for a half an hour by yourself can be powerful. The truth is, most people are petrified to be alone because they define themselves by the people around them. But if you are alone, you can define yourself by the energy within you. And once you do that, you're truly on the path to personal leadership. And when you master personal leadership, you master your your ability to navigate through life successfully. That's what I believe.
100%. Absolutely 100%, David. You're so right.
Yeah.
David, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Well, my name, David Nomchong, Nomchong, and my website is nomchong.com. It's really simple. So you can find all about me there and how to contact me there.
Sure. And I'll make sure your contact details are on this video.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
David, this has been an amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate it. Maybe we'll do it again, huh?
Well, we should. We should. There's so much more to talk about.
Absolutely. Okay. Talk to you
Thank
again.
you. My regards to you.